When we stopped last time, our manager had just asked us to change the service from the always authorized client for the everyone is authorized service provider to the bank of random credit again. That's where we started out. Now I'm going to have to go in and change all of this code, and I really don't want to do that again. I have to change what the variable type is and the instantiation and what method is called and the parameters for that method and everything else. So how can I fix that? Well, the first thing to do is to set it up so that the sales order manager is calling one data type no matter who is actually going to provide the authorization service. And I can do that by adding a new interface. I'm going to place the interface in the same package as the sales order manager because it depends on it. And I'm going to call it the iCredit Card Authorizer interface. Now I have to change it from a class to an interface right here, right? So let's go ahead and make that, and I'll let it go ahead and add that to Git for me while we're doing this. I want one method for this iCredit Card Authorizer. I'm going to have an authorize method, needs to be returning a string because I need to get a token back from it. And it's going to take a big decimal, which is the amount, and a string, which is going to be the card number. And this little thing here, I just need to get it to import that into this interface. Now, back in this Sales Order Manager, I'm going to be using this. Okay, so in the Sales Order Manager, not in the test, sorry about that. In the Sales Order Manager, this data type is going to change. So it's going to be an iCredit Card Authorizer, the second one there. And I need to make a new something, but wait a minute. I don't have anything to make yet. Okay, so let's go back and add a couple of classes in here. The first one I'm going to make is a BRC adapter for the Bank of Random Credit. So the BRC adapter will implement my new interface. iCredit Card Authorizer. And that means it needs an authorized method, which is going to be a public string, by the way. And it's right there, so I can just pick it. I'm overriding it. It gives me a problem down here in the Sales Order Manager. We'll deal with that stuff later. But right now, I need to do something here. So I'm not going to return null. What I'm going to do is create a new Bank of Random Credit Authorizer. So let's make a variable, the Bank of Random Credit Authorizer. I'll just call it Authorizer. And it needs to be equal to a new Bank of Random Credit Authorizer. Now I can translate from my parameters to the parameters of this authorizer. So authorizer, and this one has a purchase method, and it takes the card number first, and it takes a big decimal amount second. So there we go. And if I go back to the front of this, all I have to do is return that value, and we're going to be okay. So now, what about the other one? The everyone is authorized. Okay, so let's make another class for that. Let's make a new Java class. It's going to be EA adapter for everyone is authorized. And we're basically going to do exactly the same thing in here. We're going to have it implement the iCredit Card Authorizer. And it's going to have an authorized method. And that method takes a big decimal amount and a string card number. And I have to fix a couple of things here, not a really big deal. So what am I going to do? Well, basically the same thing as I did before, except this time I'm going to go get an always authorize object for my authorizer. And I'm going to return authorizer.authorize because that's what this service provider uses. But it needs a double amount and a string number. So I'll just grab my amount and convert it into a double. And I'll take my number and pass that in for the card number, and everything is hunky-dory, except for back here in the sales order manager, I've got some problems. So, whoops, sorry about that. Back in the sales order manager, I'm going to go back to the bank of random credit. So I want to make a new, there we go, our new bank of random credit adapter. Okay, and that's awesome. Now down here, I do have to do a little bit of adjusting because it is authorized, and we pass it a big decimal, not a double value, so we'll get rid of that little piece there at the end, and everything should be okay here. Now, if I go and I run the tests again, let's run these, you're going to see that we're back to our non-deterministic problem because we went back to the bank of random credit, and sometimes when I run it, it works, and sometimes when I run it, it doesn't. So we're going to need some way to fix that. But in the meantime, I took care of a few things. First of all, I implemented the adapter pattern, and that comes out of the Gang of Four book, Design Patterns, Elements of Reusable Object-Oriented Software by Eric Gamma and Gang in 1994. It also falls in line with Uncle Bob's solid principles. So we're supporting the open-closed principle, which is how we got into this in the first place. We were minimizing the editing of the code because now if I want to change the service provider, I really just need to make a new adapter for the new service provider, and I can just plug the new adapter in here. I don't have to change the code that actually calls it. It also supports the Liskov substitution principle because the adapters provide the expected behavior for what this class needs, how to call a service provider. And most importantly, it supports the dependency inversion principle from Solid. And that principle says that we're supposed to rely on abstractions, not concrete things. And that's exactly what we're doing here. The adapters, yeah, they rely on the concrete service provider classes, but somebody has to. The adapters themselves, though, provide the abstraction, the interface that the sales order manager is going to use. Also, we put the interface with the sales order manager because the dependency, the data type belongs to the sales order manager. It doesn't belong to the service providers. So it's in the logical place. It travels along with this. Okay. We're still a little bit messed up here, though, because this class violates the single responsibility principle, the big S in Bob's Solid. And that's because it has two things that it's doing. The first one is that it's responsible for deciding what adapter to use, and then it's responsible for completing a sale, which happens to use that adapter. So that's also in relationship to Craig Larman's low coupling principle in his books, because we're tightly coupled to the BRC adapter, and we don't really want to be tightly coupled to the BRC adapter. So That's what we're going to attack next.